Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar with Pagefreezer. I'm Caroline Hill, I'm Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm joined here today by Pagefreezer's Chief Revenue Officer, Peter Callahan. Hi Peter.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. And also Jessie Ward, who is Lead Technical Support Engineer at Pagefreezer, and who's going to be doing a demo for us of Pagefreezer's tech. Hi Jessie.
Hi Caroline.
Good to have you on. So today we are talking about advances in social media and online evidence collection for e-discovery and investigations, which is a hot topic, particularly after the past year, given the amount of reliance on social media and online chat. Just to do a bit of housekeeping, I'm going to do proper introductions, get us going properly, but just to do a bit of housekeeping. So welcome. If you're joining us now, then if you can say hello in the chat, we'll be doing some polls. Say hello, say where you are, say where you're listening in from. And it's an interactive, it's a live webinar, but we are recording it. So it may be that you're listening to this on the recording as well. So welcome, doesn't matter where you are listening from or whether it's recorded or not, but welcome. We're really pleased to have you here. Peter, so let's talk about, first of all, and I should mention Gabby Calor is also going to be helping to moderate. If you've got any questions, then put them in the chat, and Gabby can help you, and we'll be posting some links at the end of the chat as well. So Peter, let's talk about a bit of background first. So Pagefreezer, you've been going since 2010. It was founded by Michael Riedick in Vancouver. But tell me more. So tell me a bit more about what Pagefreezer is and what you do.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. It's for the past 11 years, Pagefreezer has focused on investing in developing innovations to master the access and preservation and collection of records. We initially focused on websites, and then we broadened our product footprint to include social media and very popular enterprise messaging platforms. As we all know, that regulations demand accurate record keeping of content. And, more and more companies are recognizing the value of having access to complete searchable records, not only for evidence capture and litigation preparedness, but also to gain greater insight into how and why conversations are taking place. So we offer solutions that serve every stage of the information governance lifecycle, preserving data in real time. And there's really two sources of online content that are important to our customers: their own channels like websites, social media, and internal communication tools, and third-party channels, which typically are focused on website and social media. And we're, at Pagefreezer, we're focused on satisfying the need for efficient online evidence collections by offering solutions that assist organizations to defend themselves effectively, as well as go on the offense when the need arises.
Yeah, you've been it's very, the way you explain it, it's pretty obvious. You've been so patient with me in the background, and in terms of getting to grips with what it is you do, I have to recommend Pagefreezer in terms of being the nicest people to deal with. And so, yeah, it's interesting. For some reason, it took me a while to get to grips with that distinction, but it's not so complicated, is it? In terms of, for organizations who on a routine, regular basis want to monitor their own internal communications, and that can be for, I guess, to put them in a good position for early case assessment and that kind of thing, and make sure that they're, and then with we'll drill down in more detail, but with the external third party, that might be, for example, IP investigations and the like, and more on the investigative side.
That's correct. That's correct.
It took me a long time to get there, Peter, as you know. So tell me about, in terms of with the different limbs, so how do you help e-discovery teams and corporate legal teams? And I know that we've had a lot of interest in this webinar from corporate teams. How are you helping them?
Well, we're helping legal teams expedite the process of finding digital evidence to collect, even if they don't own the channels. And right now, due to the global pandemic, digital communications are, exploding. They're growing at a faster rate than ever before.
Yeah. And in terms of, so then you have a defensible record, right? So in terms of the litigation, so obviously you have to think about being prepared in terms of the costs, and making sure that you're ready, because it does have a significant impact in terms of the cost, doesn't it, and how you approach a potentially litigious matter.
Absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on each legal team to reduce costs at this time. And how are they doing it? They're doing it through a variety of ways. And we spent some time with Legal Week. But essentially, if you look at the kind of growth that's happening in terms of data in the market, and the things that legal teams have to grapple with to actually find that information.
Well, I've just brought up this slide. Can you see the slide? So this is I love this slide, this fascinating slide. So we're seeing being remote. I mean, we were already, that social media is not new, but it really, I don't know anybody who doesn't rely on it every day. And this is a fascinating slide. Talk us through this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is what happens every minute on the internet. It's a slide that gets published each year, and it's fascinating. Anyone can Google this, and it's fascinating to see the growth in various mediums over the course of the last 10 years in particular. But in the 2020 edition of this, not only is Facebook every minute, there's 147,000 photos, there's 150,000 messages going out every minute. YouTube, for every minute, there's 500 hours of video being uploaded. If you think about the amount of content that is just exploding, and these are all potential sources for evidence, and from a business perspective too, consumers are spending over $1 million online every minute. Amazon's shipping almost 6,700 packages every minute. The explosion especially with the pandemic, the explosion of online presence and these enterprise collaboration and messaging tools, like you look at Microsoft Teams, they're connecting 52,000 users every minute. And businesses are seeing a tremendous spike in website traffic as well, because things have the new normal is online.
Yeah, 100%. Which creates a nightmare for employers. Now, what sort of legal matters arise from these tools that you see? Perhaps the ones that you see the most predominantly.
Well, the companies, the organizations we speak with, who similar to what they've been doing with email for a long time, they've had to monitor it because enterprise messaging or enterprise collaboration platforms are essentially the new email. It's replacing email internally. I'm not saying email is going away, but what comes from that messaging, those messaging platforms, you have a concern that corporate policies are not going to be followed. You have teams in IT in a lot of cases that are focused on data loss prevention, and what I mean by that is people sharing credit cards or personal information that shouldn't be shared through these channels. There's also we see matters arising out of discrimination, bullying, and harassment that are very common. Similar to common with email as well. And from on the websites, we see like privacy policies, accusations of fraudulent claims, disputes over refund policies. Like there was a big story last year regarding Walmart and various stores not, adhering to the same policy that was published on the website. So it was seemed to be interpreted on a store by store basis. And it was a big problem for them. And in social media channels, it's quite interesting. If it's an owned channel, a channel that the company, publishes and communicates over, there's defense against accusations of fraudulent claims, privacy violations, other regulatory violations. And it's quite interesting. Just the other day, there was a news story that was broadcast, and it was regarding that fund shops, because of the changes in law, especially in the U.S., the changes in the advertising rules that organizations need to grapple with since they're agents or they're brokers, depending on what country you're in. These people, if they are using their own social media channel to promote business, the question becomes, that becomes a liability for the company based on the new regulations. And the question is, the companies have to grapple with in their employment contracts, do they say, hey, as part of being an employee here, I, as the company, have access to your personal social media? Do I get to chance to capture that? Or at least, if it's not part of that, they're going to have their compliance teams to be monitoring it online. So all of these things make the world a little more challenging. And then from third-party channels, we see a lot of companies go, so out social media and online platforms that they don't own, we see that a lot of companies are worried about their intellectual property theft or copyright infringement claims, fraud, cyber stalking. There's even divorce proceedings, and it's interesting in the state legislature of Texas in the United States. They last year they enacted a law that allows for notices. In the past, it was a challenge to have notices sent if say you had a breakup and you wanted to send a notice. Well, a lot of times the person that's left, you don't have the address, so they can't find a physical location. And they enacted a law that allows you to notify via Facebook.
Right.
And so if your lawyer notifies via Facebook and takes a snapshot of that, because a lot of people are present online, it's okay now. So really interesting stuff that's happening.
Really interesting. And I know, but there's a lot of what was fascinating in the conversations with me we were having, but it's about, and my research is about how with these the third-party sites, the way that people have been collecting evidence without something like Pagefreezer, in terms of sort of doing screenshots that actually or that make no sense at all, were out of context, or then present certain evidentiary burdens. I'm not sure why my slide is going back, because it was present evidentiary burdens in terms of proving proving the contents, etc. So what with third party websites, what are the real key, what are the challenges, would you say, in collecting that evidence?
Well, you don't own the channel itself, so it is a public channel. That's how we're referring to third parties, is the properties or channels you do not own. And we find that with organizations there, they basically have to try to screenshot it in the moment, to take a screenshot, some form of picture of the screen in the moment. That's probably the largest challenge people have. One of the key ones. Looking at this,
the litigation and practice support technology survey, about how people what they're typically using. So Adobe Acrobat, Snagit, purpose-built capture tool, and other. So with Acrobat and Snagit, that's just a straightforward screenshot, right? So that doesn't give you the context, or sort of the way. My understanding from Pagefreezer is that it's as if when you access it, it's as if you're accessing the thing itself, which gives it all of the context, etc.
Well, if you don't own the channel, it's a little more challenging. So like screenshots, they do give a good visual representation, but there's typically no metadata to go along with it. And that could prove a problem in a court of law. They're challenging to navigate and use from a review process. And it's difficult to prove authenticity if you don't have a digital timestamp, right? And in particular, this is one I hear most often, if an organization is trying to collect a video content, screenshots can't collect that. And collecting videos, most recordings, you have to sit there and watch it. So if it's an hour-long video, it's an hour long of your time to record that. If you print and save to PDF, it doesn't look like the screen, because many times portions of that screen are cut off. So it's not a complete record. And then you'll find that there have been some purpose-built solutions that are based on an application programming interface, not to get too technical, but that touch base on tap into these platforms. But many of them they're at the mercy of the social media platform, because if things change, all of a sudden their products no longer work. And we've seen examples of that in the past year. but on top of that, the drawbacks of like screenshots from a human perspective is that, employee satisfaction levels. If you're the person that's gone to school to be a paralegal or litigation support person, I've spoken to many that are like feeling punished or not appreciated, and always being the one to do the tedious task of doing these manual captures, and it's rather challenging and mind-numbing, and some have led to resignations.
Really? I'm not surprised.
People just moving to different organizations.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, no, we didn't go to law school to do screenshots, right? Like, it is mind-numbing. I mean, this is a wider tech conversation for another time, but there are so many advantages with using technology to better effect for those routine tasks that benefit nobody, and they're not, when you've got the technology to do it, then it's just not a good use of time.
It's not, and like legal teams, whether it's public defenders, regulators, in-house counsel, they need efficiency because they're dealing with caseloads, time, and budget constraints that are unprecedented at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we'll do, we're going to do some polls, but I think we'll do them. We're alongside this video, we're going to publish obviously the link to the video and on legaltechnology.com, and we'll share it on social media. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some fun polls. We'll get a bit of engagement around when we publish this video, and we'll get some polls to find out what people are using in terms of screen capture, etc. And I think that we're going to do that. We'll do that on LinkedIn, I think. So Jesse, do you think we could go to your demo?
Yes, absolutely, Caroline. I'd be happy to show off Web Preserver, which is Pagefreezer's tool for automating web captures and basically providing evidentiary quality web captures that go far beyond screenshots. So I'll be happy to share my screen here.
Okay.
And could you please let me know if you see my screen right now, Caroline?
I see it, yeah, perfect.
Perfect, okay. So Web Preserver is Pagefreezer's solution to being able to automate all of that manual work of needing to capture any content on the web. And so it's a purpose-built tool to meet the use case of regulatory, legal cases, investigative cases where you have the need to capture either single web pages, entire websites, but especially social media across the web. You need to capture this content in a variety of formats so that you're able to search through the text of your captures and be able to review the metadata for them. The captures are assigned a SHA-256 hash to meet the federal rules of evidence for digital self-authenticating evidence. And the best feature of all is that when you capture social media with Web Preserver, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, there are special automation features built into Web Preserver that don't rely on those application protocol interfaces that Peter had talked about, those APIs. They just work directly within your browser, so it's perfectly reliable. So Web Preserver is a Google Chrome extension. It's something that you install directly from the Google Chrome store in just a couple of clicks, and then it lives directly here in your browser. And the first thing that you can ever do with Web Preserver is capture a single page. I'll talk about Web Preserver's ability to perform bulk captures of entire websites or long lists of pages. But the most basic feature is you've identified something like a web page or a Facebook timeline, and you want to capture it. So for social media websites like Facebook, if you were going to capture this, Web Preserver will do far more than just take a screenshot that you can review later on. There are automation features here. Web Preserver automatically knows that I'm on Facebook, and I have options like expanding everything on the timeline if I want to, so that I wouldn't just get a capture of what the page looked like before any interaction. Any content that requires some interaction to be shown, like comments, will be automatically expanded for me if I choose to use these automation features, which means that I would save a lot of time if I have that task, and it's not going to be error prone. If you have to actually click through a very long timeline, that would be a lot of manual work. It would be easy to miss things. But with Web Preserver, I can just choose to scroll, which means that it will automatically scroll to the bottom of the timeline for me, and click Save to begin my capture. So that's how easy it is to just start a capture whenever you've identified a timeline that you're interested in, and you get updates here in this pop-up modal about how WebPreserver is doing the work of expanding comments, showing all comments, and once things are expanded and WebPreserver is ready to take screenshots, it will actually begin the capture. So we have all of these really nice social media automation features for WebPreserver, but one of the things that we notice our users really love is how the PDFs are actually basically a facsimile of exactly what you see once you export your capture. Because this capture just completed, everything was automatically expanded. If I scroll up here, I see. But the PDFs are actually generated by just stitching together screenshots of the page as WebPreserver automatically scrolls, which means there's no surprises. If you ever try to print a PDF for a website like Facebook, then you'll notice that what you would get if you try and do this directly through your browser or Adobe, it'll have things that look wrong. It will have, it'll try and squish everything onto one little page, etc. But with WebPreserver, I noticed that if I open up a preview from my dashboard of what this capture would look like when I export it to a PDF, it's basically a perfect facsimile. This is exactly what I'll get if I export a PDF. And there's no surprises in your resulting capture. So here from my WebPreserver dashboard, I can review all the captures I've made recently. I can preview one like I just did. I can download this capture if I wish. So there are a variety of export options for any capture that you produce with WebPreserver, but as soon as you have identified the ones you want, you can just click export, and the export will begin immediately. The very nice thing is that all you have to do is capture a page, and then any use case you have for it later, you have all of these download options available, which have a variety of features. There are some features like a searchable OCR PDF that lets you search through the entire text of the page that you have exported. There is an MHTML file, which lets you open a live replayable version of the page. And the one that I just exported is a collection report. I can open this up immediately after it's exported, and it will show me a preview of exactly what the page looks like. The formatting that I have for this one is basically fit to meet a standard legal size paper. So you could hand this off in court or submit this and actually print it off live with every page having context on the file name for the capture, the URL and timestamp for the capture, and a preview of one snapshot. There are a variety of other formatting options like a single page PDF that has no page breaks, so there's no interruptions in content, to meet a variety of different use cases. And this collection report is also excellent for handing over to anyone else so they can look at what you've collected, because the first page will always have the URL timestamp, collection date, and the digital signature that's been applied to the capture, which brings the capture up to the standards of the FRE. So that's how easy it is to perform a capture of something that's complex, like a Facebook timeline, and export it with WebPreserver. But these features get extremely powerful when you look at our bulk capture menu, because this is basically an area where you can set up some operations that if you have to collect something like a massive Facebook timeline or a website that has 1,000 pages, you can use different tools to either manually enter your own URLs or collect them. For something like a Facebook timeline, this is extremely useful. To get every post's URL from the Facebook timeline, all I have to do is copy and paste the URL like I just did here, and choose to collect the links for this Facebook timeline. This means that any Facebook timeline, no matter how long it is, if you actually have the use case of scrolling very far back on a Facebook timeline to retrieve posts that were maybe made 10 years ago on a really dense timeline, you wouldn't be able to if you're just scrolling through in your browser, because your browser would actually eventually crash since your browser run out of memory. Facebook doesn't make any direct connections available through APIs any longer, but WebPreserver actually has methods that will initiate sort of a background crawl to collect every link going as far back as possible. Now, this is a very brief account that only has about 10 posts, and so it's good to show right now for the purposes of time. But what happens is within seconds, every post URL is retrieved. I can copy these and see what they look like. But if I click that Capture All button there in the bulk capture menu, it would go through every single post from this timeline, capture them one by one, expanding everything. which means that within minutes, I can identify every single post made by any Facebook timeline, whether it's a business page like we just looked at, or a group or a person. And as long as I have access to that page, to view that page, or it's public, then every URL will be collected, going further back than you would be able to access normally in your browser. Everything's captured one by one. And later on, I could go and choose to export everything from my dashboard. So it really enables large-scale, high-fidelity collections of social media content, things that you couldn't normally access in your browser, and things that would be very time-consuming and painstaking to try and capture, but could be extremely valuable, because we often find in many cases there is very valuable evidence buried deep in comments somewhere. You can use things like our searchable PDF options to search through everything you've collected, and that's where Web Preserver becomes a very powerful collections tool as well as preservation. So some other social media sites that we specialize in captures for are Instagram. This is a very popular site for social media collections, and some of the normal challenges you'll run into are things like posts having more than one image and comments being buried by you having to scroll. So with Web Preserver, you can choose to automatically, for any Instagram posts, choose to have all comments automatically expanded and capture any videos that are included in a post. So an Instagram post like this one only has 2, but it could have up to 10 photos or videos. If you ever try and capture a Instagram post that does have more than one photo in it or video with Web Preserver, the variety of what you get here is that everything will be automatically expanded for you in the timeline PDF that you export, so that I see both images for this example post that I captured recently. Everything is automatically expanded. So the comments are here, but this is also a PDF that includes everything on one single page, instead of what you see if you actually look at an Instagram post like that live in your browser, where you have to flip between slides. So from every single stage of these social media collections, we consider what are the challenges that people are encountering. The tool is developed off of real conversations that we have with our customers who are doing all the time. And you can even collect every single URL from a Instagram account the same way that I just did for Facebook with this tool. Yeah. For things like Twitter, you can also capture videos, collect every tweet, and be able to search through that. There are features that are similar for YouTube and LinkedIn. So across the board, it's automating activity. You get a PDF that looks exactly like what you have seen in your browser, and you can even search through the metadata and hand it off in a collection report. So it covers everything from the investigation to collection and handing off stage. So with that, we've taken a look at some of Web Preserver's most primary features for capturing social media, what options you have to deal with that data, and I could throw it back to you, Caroline.
Jeremy just posted in the chat. He said, "Where do we sign up?" So Jesse, the client, who is your, within, say, a corporate, that you don't need any technical knowledge, do you? You don't need to be a techie in terms of who you interact with and who interacts with technology. You don't need to be you don't need to have tech capability.
Yeah, the really nice thing about Web Preserver is we routinely train entire teams of paralegals, litigation support tech staff, and anyone who might normally be manually trusted with, could you please go take some snapshots from this Facebook post, from this Facebook timeline. It's very easy to get people set up with Web Preserver. You've seen how it's basically, you identify the page, click save after you choose some options. Everything's right there for you. It takes about 30 minutes to get started learning how to use the tool, and you can run away and start capturing what you want, plus rely on the full body of documentation we have to understand the best approaches to using Web Preserver in all kinds of different social media and web collection scenarios.
Yeah, and do you, either of you, have a sense of, if you, it's probably hard to compare because, but have you got a sense of how much time is saved? Because doing the screenshots and going through that way in the manual exercise is hugely time consuming. Have you got a sense of how much time is saved?
Well, we've after showing various examples, in a lot of cases when organizations say, okay, show us, here's a case that we had, here's a website that we had to capture. And it does vary widely, but you know, the technology, the way in which Jesse was just showing you, what some people have spent 3-4 weeks on, we can do in a couple hours. So to do it meticulously, to do it accurately, especially if it's long pages, and put it into the right formats for viewing, there's significant time savings.
Yeah, because and then obviously that equates to cost savings if we are talking about a litigation matter, you know, sort of early case assessment, etc., or preparing for a trial.
Well, and think about this, like, you know, we talked about the speed of the internet. As quickly as things are posted, they can equally as quickly disappear. So if you don't have the capabilities to capture it in the moment, there's many cases where I've heard stories from various legal firms, in-house counsel, where they go, we had this, we were going after this, and when we looked again, ready to screenshot it, it was gone.
Right.
So people are being, you know, using our technology to be much more proactive as well, and getting a lot more done, because they can, a few clicks, as you saw Jesse, capturing it, full Instagram sites, web, Facebook pages, and websites can be done in a moment. And then you can, while the tool's actually doing it, if it's a large site, it will take some time, but the tool's off doing it, you can be doing other work.
And do you tend to have people who are sort of, how do they break down in terms of, do you have a lot of presumably repeat users where they have a lot of litigation, or presumably you could also just be somebody who's got one matter? How does it break down in terms of the way that people use it and the types of users they are?
Well, we do have organizations that come to us to say, can you do a one-off, you know, capture for us and create a report? And we have that. We have a business that does that. But for the most part, organizations are attempting to, you know, reduce costs, do things in-house, and quite frankly, we say if you're going to use us for 3 or 4 captures, you should probably be looking at a license, because it's going to be ultimately more cost effective for you. And then people say, okay, that makes sense. And when they start looking at, we ask them always, take a look at the last 3 or 4 cases, the time that you allocated towards doing those captures, and let's pick an example. And usually it's at least at 10 times. We're 10 times faster and less expensive.
We should, I mean, I'm going to come on at the end to talk about workflow and how this all fits together, but let's talk about owned channels. So in terms of the challenges there, in terms of the challenges of collecting evidence from owned channels.
Well, it's, you know, if you talk to any head of litigation support or any head of the in-house counsel, the head general counsel, they'll say, well, there's all these new platforms and technologies coming, and there's this explosion of data. We need to be able to access that. We need to be able to capture that. And we need ways in which to make that efficient, because it's really challenging. Again, screenshotting is the most common way, as you saw in the graph earlier. Although purpose-built tools have made a huge surge, and we see that over and over. Especially in the past year, where organizations are looking for more efficiencies. Yeah,
and this is where, so I managed to mess it up earlier anyway, but this is where I said that it's available in the form as if you know, it's almost like you can relive it, isn't it? It's much more, rather than having a very static, it's much easier to use from an evidentiary point of view, because it captures the data as it existed from an own channel.
Correct. Our technologies are different for own channels. If for the most part, if it is social media, we have focused on, you know, integrating through the platforms and application programming interface, which allows us to collect the records in real time. So, for instance, if you are monitoring. For instance, if you're monitoring messaging for policy violations, we're capturing that our technology captures the messages in real time. So if people then delete the post because they realize, oh, it's offside, or they modify the post, everything's captured in real time. So in the captures itself, you see the original, you see the deletions, you see the modifications, whereas publicly online, you only see what's remaining there. So if it's been deleted, it's gone. But in our captures, it's still there. So it allows legal organizations the power to really monitor what's happening.
And do they tend to be, do they have to be an organisation that has had a problem, or that there's a reason why they feel they need to monitor their own channel, or is it just now something which is, or perhaps even a type of organisation within financial services, or does it tend to be just quite good standard practice?
Well, it depends on who you speak with. It is a good standard practice for any business, but we find that the organizations that are that seem to embrace this in a more serious manner are ones that are either highly regulated, or they're highly litigated against. So they're defending themselves, or they're going after people. So it's organizations that where these records or access to these records are really, really important. And with the constant changes in the regulations and the various laws that are being enacted, it's more of a burden and more of a challenge to keep up with that. So it's really important we do that. The other thing is, on the websites, we find that we have a lot of large customers that are defending themselves to, all kinds of class action suits and that based on claims on their websites. So we don't have API access to websites, but we have sophisticated web crawlers that we've developed over the past decade that do a phenomenal job of capturing what's real. And you can choose the speed in which it crawls, and you can choose the frequency in which it crawls. It's up to the customer. So some want it hourly, others want it daily, weekly, monthly, etc. Some have lesser requirements, so they have it, backed up quarterly or semi-annually, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Does it? And in terms of again, talking about the types of clients, and so does this give? Would this potentially give? I'm quite fascinated by the balance of power between law firms and corporates, in terms of what's done in-house and what's done by law firms. And obviously, from a cost perspective, that's really super important. Does this potentially, would this be something that corporate would help corporates do more in-house, do you think, or am I sort of over-egging things? Is it something that would help them contain more the discovery without going to law firm potentially?
Well, potentially. It depends on the leadership in that firm and how they want to tackle the workload. We're seeing, some of the feedback we received at Legal Week recently was around where organizations are, they're looking at the legal team as a department business where there's a budget, there's an impact, and many organizations have had to reduce some headcount.
Yeah.
Or they have reduced the amount of external work, third parties they're working with, and they're bringing that workload in-house. So they're doing more with the same amount of people, or they're doing more with less people, depending on the state of the business. So it's a really interesting scenario, but definitely all of these sources of information are, potential areas that they need. Legal departments need the ability to capture, monitor and capture these records, and then search and collect and export, all the standard things. And they need to do that in an economical fashion in today's world.
Yes. Yeah. I guess either side, whether it be the corporate or law firm. E-discovery is a fascinating area in that sense, and there seem to be shifts and sways, between. And I guess the honest truth is that unless you've got a really big legal team, and if you've got a lot of litigation, you're much more likely to be going out to a law firm. But regardless of which side of the fence you're on, this is something that you're going to need to be doing either on a sort of attack way or on a regular basis in terms of just collating the information to save the costs. So Jeremy's putting a question. But we are pro-competition. Oh, Jeremy says we're pro-competition. I don't know what that means. And then in terms of, I was interested actually. So you export from Slack, don't you? And I was interested in you do keyword monitoring for data loss prevention. Is that right?
We do keyword monitoring. We have a set of libraries that are existing patterns and things, but you can set up your own as well. So the tool gives you the flexibility to address to your corporate policies.
Yeah.
But we do find that if you don't, with all these new sources, if your in-house team doesn't have a solid IT team to get you access, like it's really challenging. And even like systems admins in Slack, to our understanding is that we've heard that they can't view private conversations. So if you're trying to, review a matter that's arose and it's based on conversations that are happening in those private conversations, it's difficult to see that for them. So not having access to the records is a challenge for sure.
So tell me about workflows. What kind of workflows are people looking for?
Well, what we see is essentially people, if you've had like some kind of event that's triggered where you've been served papers or there's a complaint internally, the first thing that organizations are focusing on is exploring what's gone on. And so they want to quickly look and preserve whatever evidence has been, created. And they want to capture all the relevant data, including like if it is one of the enterprise messaging platforms, then it's anything in any channels or groups, as well as all the private messages themselves are really important. And whether it's Slack or Teams or Workplace or Yammer or Chatter, there's a number of platforms organizations are embracing. And they want to capture that information. And then they want to be able to search that information and collect the most relevant records. And to do that, there's a human-friendly element to this. I think we had shown earlier regarding a simple post of what it looks like in a JSON format, which is computer code. People, and even PDFs, when you're trying to look at a conversation that's occurred, you saw that one example Jesse showed in the demonstration of that Instagram post. Look how long that was. Yeah. Imagine trying to flip through PDFs and follow the conversation easily. So people want to be able to have a speedier review, reduce the cost of review, and their analysis, and they want human-friendly records, a dynamic scrolling view of the world, and we give them that, and it allows them to, there's a mountain of evidence captured to go through and to find and search and find and collect the most relevant records. That's a costly process. So you want to be able to do that as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible. We've had lots of comments from our customers that talk about it's much easier to determine context and intent using the dynamic view of the records than it is on PDFs or screenshots, and definitely not in a JSON format.
She said that, but it's just a bunch of gobbledygook, basically. Slack goes from being coherent to the human eye to just a bunch of code, which is useful to no one unless you're probably Jesse.
Exactly. But then also, once you find, like, you want to be able to, based on the results of your review and analysis, you want to be able to put, if it's a matter that it's really a minor matter, at least it's been reviewed, it's been documented, it's been put into a case file. It doesn't necessarily, minor matters don't necessarily get exported to or ingested by an e-discovery system. It's only the serious matters, and that's what the way legal teams want it. Again, the cost of many of the discovery systems is based on the amount of data you have, so they only want to promote or ingest data on serious legal matters. And they find that, once, context and intent have been determined properly, they want the ability to export those records out of, like, our system to be ingested by a e-discovery system for the proper, formal process.
Yeah, that was my thoughts in terms of workflow. People want it to be as simple as possible, don't they? And as integrated, whether that mean that they can easily export, because and they want it to be easy to use. But I think that with that's why I said it seems very easy to use with a clean UX, because people's tolerance now of systems which are very clunky and difficult to use is really zero. I think we have Apple to thank for that. I think, so presumably it's pretty easy, because obviously e-discovery is a lot of different moving parts. If you're thinking of it within that context in the run-up, and presumably it's easy. It sounds like it's easy to export if it were to proceed around that to litigation.
Yeah, a highly efficient export that's easily ingested is the goal, and we have that.
Jeremy said about privacy. So about do clients butt heads? Are there any privacy law issues that your clients butt heads against when they're collating the evidence?
From time to time, and I mean the whole topic of privacy is a massive topic in itself, and there seems to be, I know between GDPR and CCPA, and now the new Virginia laws, and the new Biden administration talking about having an overall laws enacted. It's a challenging area for sure, but the information for the most part, I mean, if it's an own channel, the company has the right to collect that information or capture that information. If it's a third-party channel, they're only collecting information that is in the public domain. So it's not, we haven't had those, our customers haven't had those types of issues. It's more dealing with the new world realities that they're dealing with, because there's we're on a platform today having this conversation, and you have, between Zoom and Google Meet and now Slack and Microsoft Teams and countless others. Yeah. All of these conversations are technically, things that need to be electronically stored, depending on the laws that govern your organization, for sure.
I'm going to post in the chat the link. So I think we're going to, it's been so informative, I'm just posting it now. I can't multitask very well. I think I posted that in the chat, and we'll certainly share that alongside. For anybody who wants a demo from Pagefreezer, from Jesse or anybody else, so it's info@pagefreezer.com. And then we're going to share alongside this that you've got a really comprehensive online investigations guide, which we'll share alongside this video. And again, you can get that from info@pagefreezer.com. And so I'll put this link here in the chat. But also we'll be sharing this alongside when we publish this video. For anybody who wants to contact Pagefreezer, this is the contact details. And is there anything else? I think it's such a, I mean, the COVID, just to wrap up, I think the last year we were relying on social media anyway, but the last year, I think, and remote working has seen exponential growth in use of those channels, and I think so it must be something that is on top of, certainly with the interest that we had in the run up to the webinar. I think it must be on top of, have been risen in people's priorities. Is that the sense that you get and your experience?
Not only with the ILTA information we shared earlier in that survey, where we're seeing that purpose-built tools are being adopted at a much higher rate than just a few years ago. We're seeing organizations just dealing with the realities of reduced budgets, and that whole, it's changing the dynamic. And then on top of that, you have a proliferation of data sources that they have to kind of grapple with, and it's definitely a challenge that they're being stretched.
But actually, I guess, just sorry, we must wrap up, but also there have been cases in the past where, thinking of some of the cases in the financial institutions arena, where some of the key data has been in the chat room, hasn't it? And it took ages to stumble across that. And actually, so I guess now probably some evidence in the past before we caught up, before the tech caught up, as it were, in terms of being able to collect that data, was either missed or else it took a lot longer, as it did in probably the case that everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Well, it's a blind liability to a certain extent. It's something that's there, and then you realize it's there.
Yeah.
And we've had, like you see, there's lots of case law where organizations have discovered a breach well after the fact. They've disclosed it on their own. And the one impact that disclosure has is the fine and the penalty is usually a lot less versus someone being caught by a regulator or caught in a scenario. So there's a direct impact on the amount of the fine. It correlates to, who disclosed, who came forward to come clean. And every organization has to, including our own, we're ISO 27001 certified. We have a whole security team. all of our processes, everything we do is the lens has a security lens on it, because it's really important that we maintain, the standards that we've set for our customers.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, look, we'll share this video. We'll do some polls around it. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the demo, Jesse. That was really brilliant. And we will catch up again soon.
Yes. Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Caroline.
All right. Thanks, Jesse.
Bye.
Have a good day.
You too.